History remembers presidents. History remembers generals. History rarely remembers the women who quietly built the institutions that those nations were actually standing on. Day 25. Today I am not teaching a framework. I am telling stories. Stories of women in Africa and Brazil who did not just build careers. They built institutions that outlived them, that are still standing, that are still changing lives long after their name stopped trending. This is for every woman watching who has ever wondered if her work really matters. It does. Watch why. Wangari Maathai, the woman who planted a movement. Wangari Maathai was a biologist from Kenya who noticed something simple and devastating. Deforestation was destroying the soil a country depended on for food, for water, for survival. Most people would have written a report. She planted a tree. Then she organized other women to plant trees. Then she built an institution, the Greenbelt Movement, that trained women across Kenya to establish tree nurseries, plant seedlings, and earn income from environmental restoration. By the time of her death, the Greenbelt Movement had planted over 50 million trees across Africa. She became the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, not for a single act of heroism, but for building an institution that connected environmental restoration, women's economic empowerment, and community organizing into one sustainable system. The Greenbelt Movement still operates today. Long after Wangari Maathai passed away in 2011, women across Kenya are still being trained, still planting trees, still earning income, still building the institution she designed. That is what a legacy woman builds. Not a moment, a machine that keeps producing impact after she is gone. Maria da Penha, the woman who rewrote Brazilian law. Maria da Penha survived years of domestic violence that nearly killed her. Violence so severe that she was left permanently paralyzed. When the Brazilian justice system repeatedly failed to hold her abuser accountable, she did something most survivors never have the resources or platform to do. She took her case to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and she did not stop there. She became an advocate, working with legislators, women's rights organizations, and policymakers to draft what would become one of the most significant pieces of legislation in Brazilian history, the Maria da Penha Law. Passed in 2006, the law fundamentally transformed how Brazil legally defines and prosecutes domestic violence, creating specialized courts, protective measures, and legal protections that did not exist before. Maria da Penha did not just survive an institution that failed her. She rebuilt that institution from the outside, using her own suffering as the evidence base for systemic legal reform. Today, the Maria da Penha law protects millions of Brazilian women who will never know her name, but who are alive, protected, and empowered because of the institution she built out of her own pain. Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, the woman who organized a nation's mothers. Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was a Nigerian educator and activist who looked at the political and economic exclusion of women in colonial Nigeria and refused to accept it as permanent. She organized the Abeokuta Women's Union, eventually growing it to over 20,000 members, one of the most powerful women's political organizations in West African history. The union did not just advocate, it organized tax protests against unjust colonial taxation policies that disproportionately burdened market women. It built schools, It established welfare programs for widows and the elderly. It trained women in literacy and political organizing. She traveled internationally to China, to Eastern Europe, to the Soviet Union, building solidarity networks and bringing global political education back to Nigerian women. Her institution building did not stop with her death in 1978. The political consciousness she built into a generation of Nigerian women directly shaped the trajectory of women's political participation in Nigeria for decades afterward. Her own son, the musician Fela Kuti, built his entire political identity partly on the institutional foundation of activism his mother had constructed. That is generational legacy. Not just children who remember their mother fondly, but children, movements, and institutions that carry forward the architecture she built. What these women teach every woman watching this. None of these women waited for permission. None of them waited until they had complete resources, complete credentials, or complete certainty. Wangari Maathai started with one tree. Maria da Pena started with her own testimony. Funmilayo Ransom Kuti started with a meeting of market women in a single Nigerian town. Every institution that outlasted these women began as something small, something uncertain, something that looked at the time like it could not possibly become what it eventually became. If you're a woman watching this in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Brazil, in any nation on this earth, the institution you are called to build may also look impossibly small right now. It does not matter. Wangari Maathai's institution started with a single tree in a single garden. Yours can start exactly as small. What matters is not the size of the beginning. What matters is the decision that what you are building is bigger than your own lifetime, and the discipline to keep building even when no one yet understands what you are constructing. These women are not exceptions. They are proof of what becomes possible when an ordinary woman makes an extraordinary decision. That her life will be measured not by what she accumulated, but by what she built that continued without her. If these stories moved you, share this with a woman in your life who is building something she does not yet realize is an institution. 5 days left. Subscribe. Comment below. Which of these 3 women's stories impacted you most? I want to read every answer. See you on day 26.